The Turlock Irrigation District is in the heart of some of the most productive agricultural land in the world, and thousands of people in our service territory make their living farming. Farming is not unlike any other business, with many things that compete for a grower's attention. Running the day-to-day operations, complying with laws and regulations, managing payroll and accounting, and finding markets for their products are all tasks that must be attended to. A grower's focus on farming and managing their business can cause a momentary lack of attention to the dangers overhead or beneath their feet. This lack of focus can cause life-altering accidents. Unfortunately, each year there are a number of accidental contacts between equipment and overhead or underground power lines in the Turlock Irrigation District. These contacts can result in severe damage to farm equipment and the power system, not to mention injury or death to equipment operators or bystanders. Fortunately, there are steps you can take to minimize the risk of accidental contact with power lines. For example, be aware of your surroundings, especially when working near overhead wires. When moving irrigation pipe or other longhand tools, pole pruners or ladders under or near power lines, always keep the equipment in a horizontal position and never carry anything in the upright position. Always use a spotter to be on the lookout for overhead wires or other dangerous situations. Know the height of your equipment and the clearance required to safely pass beneath overhead lines on your property. Also, be aware if conditions on the ground have changed, lessening the amount of clearance. Performing everyday tasks, such as moving dirt or creating piles of silage or other farm-related activity, can change once ample clearance to something less, creating a hazardous situation and an accident waiting to happen. When moving equipment or vehicles, do not stop under power lines or park equipment below the lines. If underground utilities are located where you must dig, or you need to perform work underneath overhead lines, call TID to have the service rendered safe before beginning work. This is the first step and the only way to make sure the work can be performed safely. Also, be sure only qualified people are working around overhead or underground power lines. Working near high-voltage equipment is not the place to learn how to operate or move equipment. Contact the Turlock Irrigation District before operating equipment within 20 feet of any power lines, as OSHA has specific clearance requirements. Violating these standards can lead to enforcement action by OSHA. The best way to avoid contacting underground lines is to be sure the area you're working in is clear. Before digging anywhere on your property, call 811 to have underground utilities located. The first step to safely completing a task is knowing your surroundings, including those beneath your work zone. Power lines that are overhead in one part of your property may move underground on other parts. Just because you see lines overhead doesn't mean there aren't any underground. The only way to know for sure is to call and have the area checked. Buried lines may not always be in conduit and might not be as deep underground as you think. This could be due to the removal of soil after the cables were buried or other causes. Excavations by a third party that have occurred after the cables have been installed can also affect the depth. Another thing to keep in mind, there is no such thing as line-of-sight locating of underground cables. Don't take chances. Call 811 before you dig. If accidental contact is made with a power line, the machine making the contact, the ground, and any objects in the surrounding area can become energized for a significant distance. The danger isn't always obvious, and there's no way to tell just by looking if it's safe to get off the machine. For now, stay on the machine. It's the safest place to be. The risk for step potential is caused by the voltage between the feet of a person standing near an energized, grounded object. The simple act of spreading your feet apart or picking one foot up off the ground when in this danger zone can result in electrocution. This danger area can extend for a significant distance, and anyone in or entering into the area is at risk of electrocution. If anyone approaches, warn them of the danger and tell them to stay back at least 35 feet. 35 feet is about the length of a typical school bus. But remember, this is only a recommendation, and depending upon conditions, the safe zone may be much farther away. The equipment operator should remain calm, stay on the machine, and if it's possible to do so safely, move it out of contact with the wires. Remember that contacting overhead lines or underground cables may not always result in smoke, fire, or arcing. If you must exit the equipment due to an immediate threat to your life or safety, such as active fire or visible smoke, you must take the following steps to reduce the risk of electrocution. This is an extremely dangerous maneuver and must only be used when you have no other alternative. When exiting the equipment, you must never step onto the ground while you're still touching the machine. Move to the edge of the equipment to a point as low as possible to the ground without touching the ground. Cross your arms over your body and keep your feet together. Jump away from the machine, landing with both feet at the same time. It's not critical that you jump a long distance away from the equipment, just that you land with your feet together, you're stable, and not touching the machine or anything else. Move away from equipment by shuffling away from the equipment, keeping the soles of your shoes flat on the ground, and sliding them no further apart than heel to toe. They must remain in contact with the ground while shuffling away from the scene at least 35 feet. Remember, 35 feet is about the length of a school bus and is the minimum recommended distance. Continue sliding your feet along the ground until you are at least that far from the equipment, pole, or any wires or cables, whether they appear to be energized or not. If you've shuffled more than 35 feet away and feel any tingling in your feet when you move, continue to shuffle until the sensation stops. We've been providing electricity to our customers since 1923, and since that time, people have been living, working, and farming in our territory safely every day. We understand that as a grower, you have a lot on your mind, and many things compete for your attention. But when it comes to power line safety, a momentary lapse of judgment or inattention to detail can have catastrophic consequences. By knowing your surroundings, practicing simple safety tips, and taking the necessary precautions around both overhead and underground power lines, you can go home healthy and whole at the end of your day. And there is nothing more important than that. For more information, visit us on the web at tid.org or call 209-883-8222. TID, serving Central California since 1887.